Hello folks, Halazus releases on the 4th of September, but paid early access begins on Monday the 1st of September instead, and in preparation for launch, I've been putting together a series of different videos to help cover and explain all the different aspects of the game. For today, we're covering the few concerns I have since researching the game quite extensively, and unfortunately, these concerns do extend further than just a questionable price tag and main character haircut. At least we have a baseball cap and hood. Anyway, I'll say immediately that none of these concerns surround performance or the game's general development process, and as far as I'm aware, it runs very smoothly and we should have no concerns in that area at all. And despite the topic of this video, I do still very much recommend Halazus as a game. We are indeed sponsored by Games Planet here on this channel, and there's a link below for 15% off both the standard and deluxe editions for PC. But more on that at the very end of the video. The few issues I do have center entirely around the actual gameplay itself, and the vast majority of that would be regarding the combat. So, to just dive on in, the biggest issue I see here is the combat overall becoming very trivial due to how it's mechanically set up. Halazus features 3 different difficulty modes, with the hardest difficulty, Merciless, having the following description. This is the ideal setting for players who enjoy a serious challenge from combat encounters. All of the following footage was recorded on this difficulty, and after having spent hours with it, my concerns have only grown. At its core, there's a dodge, block, and parry mechanic, light and heavy attacks, as well as abilities that can be acquired through progression. However, there is a self-healing mechanic built into the game, in which after every attack you make, you build up a self-healing gauge, and then upon pressing the correct button prompt when this ring appears, you will be healed based on how much damage you just previously dealt out. To add to this, our own attacks can also often stagger enemies and allow for us to have much larger windows of opportunity. Charged attacks also build up a lot of self-healing, as well as the execution attacks seem to make you invulnerable and reward a lot of self-healing too. So, combining all of these factors, the combat can and will become very trivial if you just decide to play hyper-aggressively and tie in multiple self-heals as and when you can. As a clear example, you can watch me here just completely disregard any damage I take whilst charging my attack, because I know my attack will build up a lot of self-healing whilst presenting me with a decent window of options. So I just commit to this very aggressive playstyle and come out on the other side of combat completely unscathed. And should I ever make a mistake, I have tons of opportunities to rectify this, and overall I found it very easy to heal back up to max HP, so much so that I didn't use a single healing consumable for the entire demo. Yes, even on the toughest difficulty, and yes, even with this mindlessly aggressive playstyle. Blocking is very forgiving, so choosing to block a lot of the time will also often reward parries, and even if it doesn't, blocking itself is still very reliable in regards to not taking any damage. Now, with all of that said, I should immediately add the following. Halazus is not a Souls-like or action RPG game, and is in fact an action-adventure game instead. And I'm not saying its combat should be more refined or carry more weight. What I am pointing out, however, is that the developers have said this game is 50% investigation and 50% combat, meaning half of the game does center around this issue, and that very much could be a problem. For some of you, this probably won't sound like much of an issue, especially if you've come for the investigation and puzzle solving side of gameplay, and were maybe to some extent dreading the combat. You'll be pleased to know that the super aggressive playstyle, even on the hardest difficulty, makes it vastly more manageable than most games I have ever played. But it should be said that the combat is still quite fun. I just found it becoming very trivial. I didn't see any point of dancing with the enemies and trying to master enemy attack patterns or parry timing when I could just smash them all into oblivion with practically zero consequence. And considering this is with no upgrades, abilities, etc., and on the hardest difficulty, obviously does give me concerns. I didn't necessarily want something that was going to try and break me, as this game has very much not been marketed as that. However, I don't want to trudge through the combat for an entire game, essentially smashing through every single fight with zero effort, just because it's the most reliable and efficient way of progressing. This also potentially trivializes build variety and options, which a portion of the player base will absolutely be coming for. If combat can be so easily dealt with by just being super aggressive, regardless of stats, build, abilities, etc., then it does take a lot of the reward out of the equation. Now, again, with all of that said, some of what I'm saying is absolutely based within speculation. We only have a small segment of the game featured within the demo, and beyond that, we only have a small handful of additional footage shown here and there over the past few months. So it's entirely possible that the game features a bit of a steeper curve for combat as you progress. However, from what I've played and seen, there isn't much to reinforce this. And all of this leads to an additional concern, which I've mentioned a few times before, being the sheer volume of enemies and the lack of their variety. Now, we've seen 3 or 4 different types of these white monstrosity figures already, and also a handful of these different shape-shifting forms. However, beyond this, we have not really seen any other enemy types, and in parts of the demo and a fair few different clips of the game online, we can see segments where there does seem to be a complete abundance of enemies to deal with. Now, there will be weapon upgrades, abilities, and various options regarding offensive and defensive stats, as well as stronger and stronger enemies / challenges being featured along the way. However, if it does allow for the hyper-aggressive playstyle to just stomp all over it, then any players who even remotely come for the combat may find themselves getting bored before too long. It's a concern that is both based in fact and speculation, so make of it what you will. Others I've spoken with both agree and disagree, but ultimately, I feel it's well worth players knowing. Now, as for any other concerns with the game outside of the combat as previously mentioned, I really don't have much on my radar at all. The investigation gameplay does seem solid, and although it won't be for everyone, it doesn't appear to have any fundamental flaws or issues, and overall it seems like a really rewarding experience for those who do like that type of gameplay. The UI seems quite clean and solid. I'm yet to navigate through a lot of information at once, but overall the layout and navigation of inventories, clue screens, etc. is nice and smooth. As mentioned before, performance doesn't appear to be an issue for anyone, and we shouldn't expect any issues across the board. And then that does literally bring us to the smaller aspects, one possibly being character movement within the overworld being a little bit too floaty. It's nothing too silly and doesn't seem to impact combat much at all, but it is still very much there. And then adding to this, even within the demo, I find myself taking very long runs back and forth through sections, whether it be to check something, return to a puzzle or NPC, and overall I could envision myself doing an awful lot of running around within the full game. Outside of this, however, I don't really have any other concerns for the game itself. The movement and possibility of running around a lot I can both live with, and personally do not bother me much at all. And honestly, the one true concern I have is what I've described about the combat already. I didn't want a really hard challenge from this game, but I did expect some level of nuance and challenge here and there. So if the hyper-aggressive playstyle does indeed prove to be the most efficient way of approaching combat, then I will likely have far less of an enjoyable time overcoming any of the game's combat and challenges. Now, I do hope I framed this in the fair and constructive way that I originally set out to. I certainly don't want to scare anyone away from this game, and I will be creating guides and news videos as of the 1st of September, but ultimately, it is only fair that we all know what we're getting ourselves into. With that said, I very much recommend you go and download the game either on PC, PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series S and X to see how you feel about the game yourself and whether it is or isn't for you. The demo starts a little bit slow, but trust me, it showcases about everything you'd want or need to know about the gameplay, and after having played through it multiple times, and despite this video, I am still very much excited to get stuck in and see just what the full game has to offer. As mentioned at the beginning of this video, there is indeed a Games Planet link in the description below where you can grab 15% off either the standard or deluxe editions of Hell Is Us, and generally any purchases for any game made using the link below does very much support the channel, so just something for all you PC gamers to consider. Anyway, that would be it for this one, folks. I do have a range of guides and news videos on the channel already, so do feel free to stop on by and check things out. Otherwise, thanks for watching, folks, and until next time, peace.